This is an adjective, and this is an adverb. Now, it's really simple to transform an adjective to an adverb in English. We just added an ly. But what about for one of the hardest languages in the world? Chinese. See, an adjective describes a noun, for example, the slow man, while an adverb describes an action. He walks slowly. In Chinese, understanding adverbs is the key to making your sentences sound more expressive, whether you're speaking in Cantonese or in Mandarin. When I started learning Chinese, I felt like Cantonese and Mandarin were two different worlds. No one wanted to connect the dots, and trust me, no one wanted to talk about adverbs. They're not exactly the sexiest part of grammar, but they're so important, and that's why my team and I have put in the work to break it all down for you. Today, we've got 5 hacks to make adverbs super easy for you in Chinese, starting with ones that are just as simple as adding an ly to an adjective, all the way to the 5th trick, which is something that most people overlook. But it's surprisingly common and will make your Chinese sound a lot more authentic. Let's start with number 1. Turning adjectives into adverbs made easy with de. Let's start with the easiest way of adding adverbs into your sentence. Earlier, we introduced how easy adverbs in English are. We say I eat slowly, where we have an instant adverb by adding an ly to the adjective slow. Similar examples of adjectives would be quickly, happily, or interestingly. But does the same concept exist in the hardest language in the world? Now, in Chinese, you just slip in an adverb the same way using the word de after a verb, but before the adjective. And by the way, this is tup in Cantonese. So for example, in Mandarin, 我吃得慢,我吃得慢. In Cantonese, 我食得慢,我食得慢. Now, man in Cantonese or man in Mandarin is the adjective here. And by adding that de after the verb, we basically made it into I eat slowly rather than I eat slow. Another example would be, for instance, with the word quickly. You walk quickly. Now, the word quick in Chinese is 快, or in Cantonese, 快. That's the same thing with this one, right? In Mandarin, 你走得快,你走得快. In Cantonese, 你行得快,你行得快. So we see here, we basically put that tup after the verb in Mandarin, 走, which means to walk, or in Cantonese, 行, which means to walk, and that turned fast or quick into quickly. Then we have the adjective neat, 整齐, in Mandarin, or 整齊 in Cantonese. So now let's make this to an adverb. He writes neatly. In Mandarin, 他写得很整齐. 他寫得很整齊. In Cantonese, 佢寫得好整齊. 佢寫得好整齊. Now once again, same thing, right? We turned 整齊 or 整齊 for neat into neatly by writing de or tup after the verb to make it he writes neatly. So here the structure is simple, right? We start with the subject and then the verb, then we slip in that de or tup to act as a bridge, and then finish with the adjective. And so in English, adverbs often end with the ly to modify actions, and in Chinese, that de plays a similar role helping link the action to its description smoothly. Hack number 2. We saw earlier how that de worked magic to link the verb and the adverb. But wait, Mandarin and Cantonese don't actually stop there. There's more hacks than that. Another way we turn adjectives into adverbs is by using the words de in Mandarin or gum in Cantonese. Let me explain. Let's take a sentence, for example, he sings loudly. This is a standard subject, verb, and adverb structure sentence. But on the other hand, we can also say he loudly sings, with the adverb going before the verb, emphasizing how loudly he sings. And so, while the structure in English is less common, it's actually extremely common in Chinese to emphasize just how loudly, in this case, he sings. So, in the normal way, as we talked about just now, we can say 他唱得很大聲, or 佢唱得好大聲. That's he sings loudly. So kind of the structure we just talked about, right? So now, if we want to put more emphasis on how loudly he sings and say he loudly sings, in Mandarin, the way we say that is 他很大聲地唱歌,他很大聲地唱歌. In Cantonese, 佢好大聲咁唱歌,佢好大聲咁唱歌. So here, loud, 大聲 or 大聲 is the adjective, and we simply add that ly after it to make it an adverb. In Chinese, the element of adding one word to make an adjective an adverb is very similar. So we have a subject, 他 or 佢 in Cantonese. Then we have the adjective, 大聲 or 大聲 in Cantonese, followed by that key word, 的 in Mandarin or 咁 in Cantonese, which turns that adjective to an adverb, loud into loudly, exactly the same, and we finish the verb. 唱歌 or 唱歌 in Cantonese. Let's look at some more examples. For instance, she speaks very clearly. Now, normally with our previous hack, the way to go is 她說得很清楚. Or in Cantonese, 佢講得好清楚. But now if we want to emphasize how clearly she clearly speaks, then we would say 她很清楚地說話. 她很清楚地說話. In Cantonese, 佢好清楚咁講嘢. 佢好清楚咁講嘢. So now here, clearly is the adverb that's derived from the adjective clear, or 清楚, or 清楚 in Cantonese, and we added that de in Mandarin or gum in Cantonese to make it really emphasize the clarity of her speech and turn it into an adverb. Let's take another example. In English, softly. So in Mandarin, 輕輕的,輕輕的. In Cantonese, 輕輕咁,輕輕咁. So for example, in English, she closed the door softly. So in Mandarin, 她輕輕地關上門. 她輕輕地關上門. In Cantonese, 佢輕輕咁閂埋門. 佢輕輕咁閂埋門. Using the same logic, 輕輕的 or 輕輕咁 in Cantonese describes the gentle manner in which we close the door, right? And similar before, right, we put them after the subject and before the action, right? Think of it once again, kind of like dressing up a sentence, right? The adjective sets the style, right? Then we add that the or gum in Cantonese to tie it all together, make it an adverb, then just put the verb afterwards, right? In English, we rely on that ly to transform adjectives into adverbs, but in Chinese, we use the in Mandarin and gum in Cantonese to do the same job, giving a sentence that kind of smooth, natural flow. But of course, there are 5 hacks, and these are only 2. So there's more coming, right? Just like in English, where not all adverbs actually end with ly, Chinese has plenty of adverbs like always and soon that don't follow these patterns. And now we get into number 3. Master time in a snap with adverbs. Adverbs of time. There's one thing we all really need more of, and it's time. But when it comes to Chinese, time isn't just about numbers on a clock. It's about when things happen, and adverbs are the magic words that kind of make it all clear. So the time adverb should come right before the verb to indicate when the action happens, making it super straightforward, all right? For example, in English, I am not leaving yet, right? That yet is your time, okay? Now in Chinese, it goes before the verb, okay? So to say not yet in Cantonese, it's 仲未, 仲未. In Mandarin, it's 还没, 还没. So for example, in Mandarin, 我还没走. 我还没走. In Cantonese, same thing, right? 我仲未走. 我仲未走. Just pop in 还没 in Mandarin or 仲未 in Cantonese before the verb leaving, 走 in Mandarin or 走 in Cantonese, and your sentence instantly gets that I haven't left yet, right? So another example is I just left, okay? In Cantonese, it's just, we say 啱啱, 啱啱. In Mandarin, say 剛剛, 剛剛. So for example, in Mandarin, 我剛剛走了, 我剛剛走了. In Cantonese, 我啱啱走咗, 我啱啱走咗. So here we use 剛剛 in Mandarin or 啱啱 in Cantonese to make it clear the action happened moments ago. It just happened. We do that by putting it right in front of the verb 走 or 走, meaning to leave, right? Here's a tip to get started with remembering Chinese adverbs. Like, don't overwhelm yourself, right? Begin with the basic adverbs like very, 很 in Mandarin or ho in Cantonese, and put it before the adjective. Then end the sentence with a verb. So let me show you an example of that right now. Let's use an adjective like 快 or 快, which means fast. Then use the basic adverb very, 很 or ho in Cantonese. Now, if we then say the train will arrive very fast, that essentially means the train will arrive soon, right? Same kind of meaning. And so that's exactly what it is, right? The word for soon in Cantonese, 好快, 好快. In Mandarin is 很快, 很快. So for example, the train is arriving soon. In Mandarin, 火车很快就到, 火车很快就到. In Cantonese, 火車好快就到. 火車好快就到. So here, 很快 in Mandarin or 好快 in Cantonese tells the train is going to arrive soon, And we do that by putting it in front of the verb, right? All right, next we got frequency adverbs, okay? Let's talk about habits, for example. Do you always scroll through YouTube before bed and subscribe to Cantonese and Mandarin? Do you often forget where you left your keys? Or maybe you rarely eat breakfast? These are what you call frequency adverbs. Here's the hack. In Chinese, you can easily show how often something happens by dropping an adverb of frequency right before the verb. Think of it as your shortcut to adding kind of like rhythm to your sentences, whether it's always, occasionally, or in this case, rarely. Now in Cantonese, for always, 成日, 成日. So in Mandarin, we express that with 经常, 经常. So for example, in English, he always plays basketball. 他经常打篮球. 他经常打篮球. Now in Cantonese, 佢成日打籃球. 佢成日打籃球. So just plug in 經常 or 成日 before the verb 打籃球 or 打籃球, and boom, you made it clear this guy lives on the court. We just saw how always sets the tone for regularity in actions, but what if you want to say something less frequent, like occasionally? Now in Cantonese, 有時, 有時, which means occasionally, right? So in Mandarin, 有时候, 有时候. Now let's take an example. In English, she occasionally cooks. So for example, in Mandarin, 她有时候做饭. 她有时候做饭. Now in Cantonese, 佢有時煮飯. 佢有時煮飯. So 她做飯. 佢煮飯, she cooks. 她有時候做飯. 佢有時煮飯, she occasionally cooks. In Chinese, it always goes before the verb, right? Whereas in English, it can go before or after, right? He occasionally plays basketball, or he plays basketball occasionally, right? Either kind of work conversationally, but in Chinese, by the way, when I say Chinese here, I mean Cantonese and Mandarin. When I say Cantonese and Mandarin, I'm specifically referring to either one. Another example is he rarely reads. Now in Cantonese, to express rarely, we say 冇幾可, 冇幾可. In Mandarin, to say rarely, we say 幾乎不, 幾乎不. Now, to expand a little bit more, 几乎 basically means like more or less, nearly, and then 不 means no. So he more or less no read book. So for example, 他几乎不看书, 他幾乎不看書. Now in Cantonese, 佢冇幾可睇書, 佢冇幾可睇書. 幾乎不 basically means more or less no, basically means rarely. So he rarely reads books. So by adding 幾乎不 or 冇幾可 before the verb, now you're speaking like a local. Power tip. Adverbs become so much easier to use when you actually hear them in use. And so to really grasp how to use them, just watch some different Chinese dramas, right? TVB dramas or Mandarin dramas. Watch some shows. Pay attention to how native speakers naturally incorporate adverbs into conversation to sound a lot more fluid. Focus on the context and tone. How does someone express 成日 always when they're frustrated versus when they're being playful, right? 你成日打籃球, you always play basketball. 你成日打籃球, you always play basketball. You notice how the adverb shifts in meaning and feeling based on its delivery. If you want to learn more about how to add feeling into your Chinese, just comment below feeling, and if there's not people commenting that, I'll probably make a video. All right, hack number 5. Living up a language with adverbs of degree. Adverbs are also levels to emotions and actions. They give your sentences subtle to huge differences, showing your kind of passion for things in life. So let's look at this famous example from Shaolin soccer.
做人如果冇夢想，同條鹹魚有咩分別啊？
鞋都冇一對，咪鹹魚一條咯。學咩人講理想？
做人如果冇夢想，同鹹魚有咩分別？做人如果冇夢想 so as a person, if you don't have dreams, 同鹹魚 like with salted fish 有咩分別? What's the difference, right? Now let's look at how the sentence changes if we add some different adverbs of degree to it. 做人如果冇夢想，同鹹魚有啲分別。做人如果冇夢想，同鹹魚有啲分別. If a person has no dreams, they're a little bit different from salted fish. Now, next one. 做人如果冇夢想，同鹹魚可能冇分別。做人如果冇夢想，同鹹魚可能冇分別. If a person has no dreams, then maybe they're no different from salted fish. Now, next one. 做人如果冇夢想同鹹魚完全冇分別。做人如果冇夢想同鹹魚完全冇分別。If a person has no dreams, they're absolutely the same as salted fish. It's over the top. Did you notice how the adverbs affected how listeners kind of understand and take in the sentences? Just that one word changes the sentence meaning entirely. So here you've got adverbs giving us levels of emotion or action, what we call adverbs of degree. 有啲, a bit, 可能, maybe, or 完全, absolutely, completely. They describe different levels from little to extreme of how a dreamless person is similar to a salted fish. Okay, so from this example, we can see that adverbs don't just modify the verbs, they can also modify adjectives or even a word group to provide more detail. So for example, if you say she is beautiful, right? The adjective beautiful describes the noun she, right? But what if we want to emphasize just how beautiful she is? Well, that's where adverbs come in, all right? Adverbs don't just describe verbs, they can also describe adjectives. So we could say, she is incredibly beautiful, where incredibly is the adverb intensifying the adjective beautiful. Now, in the case of Chinese, let's look at some super easy examples of adverbs indicating kind of levels that you can kind of take home today that'll help you better describe the degree of something in your daily life. So, basically how much something is or how little something is. In English, he is a little nervous, right? Where you put the adverb a little in front of the adjective nervous. Now, in Cantonese, very similar, but it just becomes 有啲, 有啲. In Mandarin, we use 有点, 有点. For example, 他有点紧张, 他有点紧張. Now in Cantonese, 佢有啲緊張, 佢有啲緊張. So 緊張is same as 緊張in Mandarin, which means nervous. Okay, so here you put 有點 or 有啲 in front of the adjective 緊張 or 緊張 to describe the level of nervousness this person's feeling, right? So adverbs of degree go in front of the adjective just like English, okay? And this is in both Cantonese and in Mandarin. If you're still watching this video, you probably noticed, by the way, like all the slight differences in specific words between Cantonese and Mandarin, right? Like 有点 and 有啲, but how at the same time, we have a very similar structure. The key is understanding the differences in the relationship between Cantonese and Mandarin. And if you want to learn more, I have a free rapid fluency guide for Cantonese speakers to learn Mandarin that you can check out in the description box down below. Completely free. So remember how earlier we use 很 or 好 to express very? Well, to express especially, we use 特别, or 特别, 特别 in Mandarin. So for example, 今晚特别棒, 今晚特别棒. Now in Cantonese, it's the exact same thing once again. 今晚特別正, 今晚特別正. Tonight is especially great. So just slip in 特別 or 特別 in Cantonese before your adjective great, which is in Mandarin 棒 or in Cantonese 正. And now you have more ways to describe things, okay? Now we are uncovering something that most natives always use, but don't teach you in textbooks. This is something you're only gonna learn here. Now in English, we love to spice things up with swear words to emphasize how we feel. This movie is freaking terrible. Replace freaking with the swear version of that, right? Well, guess what? In Chinese, we do it too. Swear words can be used basically as adverbs to crank up the intensity to the highest degree, okay? And I always say, you're not fluent in the language until you can swear in the language. So that's why we are going to cover a little bit of swear words to help you, because adverbs of intensity wouldn't be complete without a little bit of swearing to really up it to the highest degree. In Cantonese, the swear word we use is 好撚, 好撚. So in Mandarin, the most common way to do this is with 他妈的. 他妈的. So, for example, in English, it kind of be like, this movie is freaking good. In Mandarin, 电影他妈的好看. 电影他妈的好看. Now in Cantonese, 電影好撚好睇. 電影好撚好睇. Basically, the movie freaking good watch. Now note that these two examples are the exact same as the ones earlier when we used 特別 earlier for especially. So 電影特別好睇, 電影好撚好睇. The exact same, we just changed that adverb of degree. Same thing in Mandarin, right? 電影特別好看, 電影他媽的好看. The exact same. So using this word is the highest adverb of degree, and so use it with caution. And also, please don't go telling people that I taught you this. Anyway, awesome. So by applying these 5 hacks, you'll be able to express yourself more naturally and effectively in both Cantonese and Mandarin. Mastering adverbs is one of the most important things because it really lets you express yourself at a very high level. And I hope with these hacks, I've helped you realize that adverbs are not as difficult as you might have thought in Chinese. They're actually quite similar to English. Even with the trick of adding an ly, we had that in Chinese too. Hope that was helpful, and if it was, then click here to watch another video that YouTube thinks you'll love, and click here if you're a Cantonese speaker who wants to learn Mandarin. 周一见，再见。